Hey guys.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
How is it going?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. Just
Hey guys.
relax. Hey Alberto, how are you?
Hey George, nice to finally hear from you. Good, good. How are you?
Yeah, you as well. Yeah, it's been nice to see you involved in the project and putting up some good MRs. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, you can expect more of that hopefully in
Cool.
upcoming sprints weeks.
Cool. Awesome. Are you with Instant? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So James is also kind of involved in that. So we're looking to kind of, you know, leverage VCX to build basically a wallet SDK, which would be like cross-platform,
Hmm.
Android, iOS, and then hopefully later some React Native, and then even thinking of going into the Flutter space as well. So yeah,
Cool.
that's the plan.
Cool. Were you talking about web as well a while ago?
Right, that was an interesting kind of POC we were trying to do.
Hmm.
Um, but there was a lot of nuances to that, and certain challenges when working with Wasm, right? As I think you even mentioned, or was it Patrick? And sort of converting some of the dependencies on NASCAR
Hmm.
and getting that to work on web. And there were some alternate routes there as well. But ultimately, we decided to kind of archive that for now, and just stick with the common use case with mobile. But
Hmm.
it's not out the window, but it'd be very interesting to see that somehow, maybe sometime down the future, especially with Rust, having all these nice little like with Unify wrappers and maybe
Hmm.
able to expose that in Kotlin and Swift. It'd be nice if we have like a web version too at some point. So that'd be kind of all around solution. So yeah, it's a thought.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the WASM stuff scares me a bit, to be honest. And it's a bit foreign.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, this is all foreign
Justifiably.
to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. James and I have been sort of touching on, you know, considering WASM and making sure that hypothetically the Aries VCX is designed in a way where you can sort of plug in and out dependencies in a way that it should be compatible with any platform, so long as the dependencies you compile it with are compatible with that platform as well. And that's sort of
I
why
mean, one
making
of
it
the biggest
modular is
things that,
important.
sorry, one of the things I wanted to mention there is that one of the biggest things is that I don't want us to make it harder for us to make things wasn't compatible in the future.
Hmm.
So
Yes, yeah.
making sure we're keeping our traits and whatnot and being able to swap out dependencies is really critical. Sorry to cut
Yeah.
you off there, George.
No, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I'm honestly still trying to learn the different crates folders from the VCX. I am honestly still new to Rust as well, but I've been learning the past couple of months.
Hmm.
And you might have seen some questions by Pankaj. He's also one of our developers here at Instant, and we have another guy, Abhishek. They're very new to Rust as well, along with VCX, of course, and sort of the whole areas framework. But yeah, it's so far they've gotten a somewhat of a grasp on kind of all these areas the past couple of months. And the sort of whole SSI world as well, with the help of James, as of course he's been helping us a lot understand the protocol itself and the different entities and what's being sent where and how it works in general. So So
Mm.
yeah, getting that out of the way and just kind of looking at the some of this Rust stuff and I know James has a few ideas to kind of maybe organize it. And I'm happy to get involved with that. But yeah, I'm really excited about this project and Aries-vcx in general. I've been, personally having fun with it. I think it's really, really cool. I'm not even sure why we haven't heard, or at least I haven't heard more about unified wrappers. I think
Mm.
it's a really cool and powerful tool for like especially Web3 applications, right? Since there's a lot of stuff in Rust, from what I can tell,
Yeah.
that can easily be exported into kind of these foreign languages. So I am really, really excited to, learn Rust and kind of use that into kind of my advantage when working with mobile mostly. So yeah, so it's really cool to see these kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah, fully agree that it's surprising that Unify isn't talked about more. It's pretty magical. I think one of
It
the
is.
biggest consumers of it is the Matrix organization. They have like a Rust SDK and compile it into
Mm-hmm.
Android and iOS to make their native applications. And they're sort of leading the way, in my opinion, on how to use Unify to its max potential. Yeah, Unify as well is, I think it's approaching a stable 1.0 release. So hopefully it gets some more attention when that happens.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I remember you telling me about that company, and yeah, that's I use that company as sort of an argument into like it's totally usable, right? It could
Mm.
definitely be used to generate foreign languages. So
Mm.
yeah.
Awesome. I think now is probably a good time to jump into the agenda and share that. This is we've already been talking for a minute. Really good conversation so far, but this is the 9th of July Aries-vcx community call. This is a hyperledger call, so note the antitrust policy and the code of conduct. Um, Basically, make sure we're treating each other with respect and discussing things appropriately. In terms of announcements, not too much adjustment here. The biggest thing I wanted to flag was the discussion of we're looking to remove the indie SDK features and crates, anything in legacy. So this is fairly large removal of things, but we don't believe this is actually going to impact anybody because it was primarily consumed by ABSA. Um, Based off of everything that I have communicated in the Aries working group, as well as with Patrick and whatnot, I've not heard of anybody who's actually using these crates or features. Um, so I think that from my perspective, we are likely good to move forward on this. And specifically, one of the things that Sam recommended in the Aries working group call was that when we go and remove these features that we could place in the README, the last version that the Indie SDK was supported on, because that would allow someone to go to the last supported version and then be able to actually upgrade from there. Especially, for instance, if they have a wallet that was based off an older version of or that is using Indie SDK, they could use the migrator at that point in time. Um, yeah. Any comments on that one?
No, yeah,
Uh,
sounds good.
well, is this tied in into like any of the other stuff that, for example, um, like the current VCX crate and all that? Is it kind of using anything from here, or is that already independent to this, the NDVDR tools?
That is a good question. If I remember correctly, the ASCAR is you've been working with most with the back channel George, is it using NDSDK or is it using the ASCAR? Because I don't remember actually. I want to say it's
Um,
using NDSDK at the moment.
yeah, I think it would be using Indie SDK.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of things are using it by default. Um,
Oh, okay.
So our code base is using it, but I don't. I think that that doesn't preclude us from changing its usage. Meaning,
yeah.
right now, essentially, all of these pieces are something that can be supported via Aries ASCAR, Anon-Creds
Hmm.
RS, and IndieVDR, which we are yeah, it's mostly like changing which one we're using. I say mostly because it's a little bit of a wave of my hand. It might be a little bit more complicated than that, but we already have replacements implemented for anything in the legacy here.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're the only consumers of it, ironically.
So, for example, under the areas folder, I see, I think, is it the areas folder? There's like a non-creds folder, and I'm guessing those are crates. And then I see like an ASCAR folder as well. If you go, yeah, those exactly. So are I'm guessing these, because I noticed that these are relatively new. So does this
Mhm.
have any relation to those to that legacy in the SDK that's being used? Or this is
Yes.
okay.
So for instance, under a non-creds here, we have a non-creds, which this is, I believe, using a non-creds RS. Um,
Okay.
and we have the CredX non-creds, which is using the, according to my understanding, is using the legacy indie VDR tools. Um,
Mhm. Okay.
I think it's
uh,
using Codex, Indie
oh, is it using
Codex.
CredX directly? That would make sense.
Yeah.
But so that this is, for instance, one of the things we would like to remove is keep a
Mm,
non-creds here. Keep the base trait so that this can be we can have other implementations of it, but we want to remove the CredX so that we don't have to continue supporting something that has been deprecated from the
Mm.
community perspective.
gotcha. Okay.
Uh, awesome. In terms of work done, I want to say good work, George, getting the test harness back channel updated. That has all been merged in and whatnot,
Mm.
as well as the did exchange 1.1 updates. Uh, the one thing I wanted to mention here is the I know you have created a uh, PR for updating the back channel for the connections protocol for
Mm.
to be able to accept the trust ping. I briefly looked at that. I didn't have time to give it a full approval before this call, but I would expect to be able to do that today to get that merged in.
Cool. Cool. Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, sort of rationale for that is that, yeah, the AATH testing between VCX and other agents works in one direction, but doesn't work in the other direction where VCX has to process a trust ping, leaves the connection in a bad state.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, it was causing a bit of issues.
it completely makes sense in that, especially since, if I remember correctly, it's not like the connections RFC actually specifies who use. It leaves it ambiguous, and so it's more of a it's the best practice that the community implemented when working with each other, which is a little, as Stephen Kern had put it, was not ideal.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. That's why we got did exchange now to make everything clear.
Yep, yep. Um,
Question.
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I was gonna ask just a general question on this test harness. Where's that trust ping sending the ping to? Is there like a Docker running some sort of agent, or how does that back channel test harness work?
Yeah, so each framework or library defines our own back channel, right? So we have the VCX back channel, Akamai has a back channel, Credo has a back channel, etc. And these back channels are all Docker images. And then the AATH project is responsible for like orchestrating these Docker images to all talk to each other.
Oh,
So the back channel, this AATH is sending requests to these back channels to tell the agents to do stuff like create an invitation or accept an invitation. Um, and then the back channels,
mm.
what's behind them is the agent itself, so VCX or Akapai. Um, and
Is
so
this is
orchestrating
this the
them.
project that Sheldon leads?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, okay, so
I
this
believe he's
is
one of the primary maintainers, at least. I know that I think this was a uh, there's multiple people involved because also this is the
right.
Aries agent or the Aries mobile test harness is related to this project as well. So, but
Mhm.
yes,
Hmm.
So George, so basically, are you pulling like their stuff into here and then testing it against VCX? Is that the idea?
So the Aries-vcx repo now publishes a backchannel image. So we maintain our own backchannel as
Oh,
a
okay.
crate within the Aries-vcx repo. And then that
Got it.
publishes an image, and then that image is consumed by the AATH repo to run tests against it. And then it publishes results periodically to like show how well VCX is doing against other agents, etc.
Right. So I think that's part of also the pipeline, right? That you have. It runs through this. I don't remember if I think I saw something in the checks when I did the MR.
yes,
Am I getting that
there's
right?
yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, awesome. No, this is cool. All right.
There's a I could send you one of the previous Aries VCX calls. It's probably slightly actually outdated now, but Patrick ran through um uh running through the test. Like I would recommend being able to set this up and be able to run the tests, and it's honestly actually not too hard to do. I can
Okay.
also send you the like the commands that we should probably make a PR now that I think about it, George, to what is the command that we're using to test because that might help. Um, or like put it in a README, you know.
Yep. Yep.
I could probably
Yeah,
Okay.
do
that's
that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I have like some sort of custom commands I've been running as well to like, test a in development version of Aries VCX against Akapai main and stuff like
Mm,
that. Sort of help development.
yeah. Is
Yeah.
that something you want to put
Yeah.
in the README then?
Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome.
Cool.
Um, in terms of, I think that covers the recent. Well, and you did a small PR here, Alberto, so it's good to see.
Yep.
In terms of actually getting to the agenda, actually have a couple of things on here. Any things that we should add on here that isn't already here?
Mm, Let me take a look at my notes here quickly.
Yeah, no, for me.
Uh, no, I think that's pretty much good for me. Yeah.
All right. Um, so first one, because I figured it might be a quicker discussion, being the React Native doing. Shouldn't have actually put Unify here. Um, React Native turbo modules. Um, the thought process is that we want to be able to consume generic Aries VCX code from a React Native perspective. Uh, and how do we go about doing that? My recommendation here was to I agreed with Alberto and that we want to use turbo modules to do so. And I specifically recommended that we see if we can follow some of the approach in the Anoncreds RS repo because Animo has done some good work of going from on Creds RS and putting it into a React Native context using Turbo modules. So we can probably reference some of the work done here. I will fully admit I've not worked with Turbo modules before, so there's a lot that I probably don't know, but I can give you the quick high level rundown from my understanding.
Yeah, yes,
Um,
please.
Essentially, from my understanding, is that uh, the previous strategy with React Native, when wanting to go from native to React Native, was that this was how the NDSK did it, is that we created a Java wrapper and a iOS wrapper, and then we created a wrapper around those two and did a React Native bridge between the two,
Hmm.
which has performance and bugs between the two. It's a little bit of a limited system. It was really great, but not the best end goal. Um, and is also complicated in that you have to have the Android and the iOS wrapper, which is um, taxing from a maintenance perspective. Um, so recently, I guess it's been actually a little bit longer now. Recently-ish, React Native has released Turbo modules, which allow you to go from native C code directly into React Native TypeScript land. Um, and from my understanding, this gets defined. You essentially end up defining your. I don't remember if it goes from your C. I want to say it's from your C definitions to your TypeScript definitions, but essentially you end up defining your types in a similar, probably a little bit more involved than with Unify, and it will do the translation from C into React Native for you. Um, so essentially, like if we have, this is on the TypeScript side, providing the binders for if I want to, uh, uh, create a presentation or get a presentation request from JSON, we'll call in and put a error handler around it. But this is essentially what we expose to the React Native side for usage. And then on the other end, the um, I don't know where the corresponding function is, but oh, it's right here. This is the C definition that will actually call the appropriate function. Um, so we do have to output to C and then to React Native. So it's not using Unify from that perspective, but is simpler than doing Java and Objective C to React Native, that mess.
And
Um,
from what I mean, this is the part where maybe I don't know Rust enough to understand, but would you get the C part right here from Rust? Would it be in a similar way that you would run like a Wasm project where you kind of get some sort of C generated code from the Rust code base and then put that into here? Or how does that jump from Rust to C?
I think you can. You can mark functions as extern C, and that's basically saying
Oh
you
yeah, yeah.
can export it as a C callable function, from my understanding. So I
Yeah,
think
I
you
think
write a layer on top of VCX, which makes it into these C callable functions.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
right.
I
yeah.
think you're right. Yeah. I think I just remembered that while you were just saying that. Yep.
Um, okay. Yeah, thanks for the summary. I do want to explore the alternative though.
Yeah.
So in React Native, and I haven't used it before, so maybe I'm being naive, but so you can write a sort of React Native module that behind the scenes calls into like a native implementation, like a Java or Objective-C implementation. Is that right?
Yes, over the React Native bridge. Yep.
Okay, that's the yeah. And presumably it can call into like Kotlin and Swift
Yep.
code as well.
Yep, yep, yep.
Do you think it'd be easier if we write that bridge which calls into unified Swift and Kotlin code?
Hmm.
Um,
Good question.
And so the reason I'm asking is because as you can see with like having to write these extern C functions and then on the React Native side having to, wrap everything in these object handlers and all of this stuff. And I think when you get to asynchronous code, it might get even more difficult to write wrappers around it. That's sort of the point of Unify is that it generates all of that wrapping on the Rust side and then catching it on the Swift and Kotlin side and handles it all for you and converts things into asynchronous functions and lets you pass classes around or interfaces, all that good stuff. You don't have to deal with the raw data. That's sort of the selling point of Unify, right? Um, so I don't know if you could write a React Native bridge that calls into Swift and Kotlin, maybe you don't have to deal with all of that ugliness, and so it'd be easier, is my
if
thought.
I
Correct me if I'm wrong, James, but I think the main thing you said at the beginning, right? Turbo modules is like much faster, right? And way more efficient when kind of handling the code because you're going directly into kind of C, right? So wouldn't that be sort of like the reason to avoid the bridge though?
I think that there is some there's multiple benefits there from a performance perspective, but also from a there's going to be less uh potentially less bugs and more what's the word I'm looking for? Mm, I think they have learned from their errors in the first approach because one of the things that ends up happening with the React Native bridge is they actually are doing anything you pass between React Native and native is being JSON serialized,
Hmm.
which is can be not ideal. So you can actually run into size issues, which we actually have run into when working with in Aries context with the non-creds. Um, so I think that you may be correct to a degree in that it may be simpler from going to Unify and then wrapping around that. But I also think that I think we're losing out some on the React Native front, and it yeah. So like I think it could be worth exploring potentially, but I think that the um if I were to approach it not having actually implemented with turbo modules, I would try and use turbo modules first, and especially given that that is the way that is recommended now from the React Native side to develop new native modules, according to my understanding.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's like the what everyone's been waiting for a while now. And so I know there was a big hype in the React Native community to get their hands on that. So yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
But I know that we're not from my uh, I think it could be worth if we find that it's a high cost for us to do the C layer to and then to the React Native layer, we could consider the other approach. But I think from a first whack at it, going with the turbo modules would be my recommendation.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think it's worth experimenting. I don't know. This
Yeah.
like code I'm looking at here scares me a bit, to be honest. I'm sure it's all solid, but having to write unsafe code and have all these raw handlers for these raw C data types, doing that yourself scares me a little. And then I couldn't imagine how asynchronous is handled with these raw.
And
function.
to be fair, asynchronous is an absolute headache when it comes to the React Native bridge.
Right.
You have to callbacks, and it's a gross time. I
Okay. Okay.
it, we the amount of custom code that was written in the SDK React Native project, it wasn't a lot, but it was definitely a headache of that has to be uh it was gross. So yeah, I think either way we're gonna have a time when it comes to doing asynchronous stuff is my guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing being here is there may be ways for us to better handle doing C, meaning uh, since I haven't done it yet, given that Animo has been more on the JavaScript side of things, there might be ways we can do this in a safer manner than is being done in this specific function, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
If there's
Yep.
pieces that concern you here about the data and whatnot, so I think it's definitely worth trying to not shoot ourselves in the foot as much as possible. So I
Yep.
agree with you on that.
Yep. Yep. For sure. Yeah, I think for a bit of history, the and maybe no, but the VCX repo used to have Java and I think Objective-C, maybe Swift, uh, wrappers and a whole binding layer, which was essentially similar to what we're looking at here, where the VCX guys manually maintained these sort of C callable functions, and then the Java layer would call into those raw functions and try to wrap it and make it look a bit prettier. But uh,
It's
I
not
would
scalable
recommend
or
talking.
maintainable.
Yeah, I'd recommend talking to Patrick about it. I think Patrick's got a bit of trauma having to deal with all of that. Yeah, but yeah, definitely, there's options.
Yeah, and you can correct me, Alberto, but I don't think our present present requirements, because we're not looking at React Native first. We're trying to target the native Android and iOS. So I think
Hmm.
that would be a subsequent investigation we should do potentially.
Yeah, I think it the native ones would definitely be first priority, and then all of the rest of the kind of cross platforms would come in next. Um, just mainly because I guess that's sort of the foundations, I guess you could say. And that way we can supply SDKs for anybody that wants to use it on their current existing app that may have already developed it on native like Objective-C or Java or Kotlin or Swift. So yeah, that's the idea to support as much as we can.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because like if you had Kotlin and Swift SDKs published out there, React Native consumers can still pull it in and write
Yep,
their own bridge if they
Yeah,
really want it, right?
exactly. Yeah.
and also the one of the things from my perspective from the overall community is that right now there is not a good mobile solution for using Aries in a native context. We have the great AFJ, I should say, Credo at this point has handles React Native pretty well. Like that is a good project for that, but that
Mhm.
cannot do a native context, and so that ends up missing a lot of situations where you have a native app and you need to use Aries. So if we can fill that need, that's a really good need to fill from an overall community perspective, or at least a good
Yeah,
place to start.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Cool. Uh, Alberto, you wanted to talk some about the UDL files with Unify. Uh, yeah,
E
you wanna take that away?
Yeah. So yeah, I've been just kind of running the project from scratch, and sort of one of the main PRs that I did recently was to adjust some of the commands to actually run that Android bash script. So from what I can tell, that script kind of generates the foreign um, language bindings and then moves it into the mobile demo folder, right? And then the mobile demo folder has like an Android project and it consumes it. But
Mm,
it seems like the structure changed a bit, right? So if you take a look at the current UDL,
You
the
wanna?
current Android file, and let me see if I can share my screen here so I can show everybody what I mean. So, so let's see here. Let me just move my bar over here. So if I go into scripts, right, and then this is the command that's basically being ran once um you run that new command I posted. So you guys can see
mm,
here it's running this cargo new run and
mm,
running the source vcx.udl. But if you run this as is, you'll probably end up finding that there isn't a vcx.udl. There is now I believe, is it here? Sorry, I'm still getting my head around
Oh, I
uh
think will it be in the
agent.
rappers directory?
Is it is it so here
Yeah,
core
Aries rappers. Oh, I
source. Okay,
thought
yeah,
it was.
here we go. So yeah, so here you'll see that we have VCX ASCII UDL and VCX Indie UDL. So there's
Mhm,
two UDL now. So the way I understand these files, they're sort of like telling Unify which components you want exposed from the librs, right?
mm,
So from what so from what I'm seeing on um that previous file, that Android uh bash script, it's looking for a basic vcx.udl.
mm.
Um so basically what I ended up doing, let me bring this up. Uh and I guess I just wanted to check in with maybe George or anybody else that may know about this. So it seems like it's working now. I was just testing it before the call. So what I ended up doing is running that same command just twice now, but for each UDL, right? So one for ASCII, one for Indie.
Mhm,
And it seemed to work because I could see now it's generating these .so files, which from what I understand, this is what's being sent to the mobile agent, and then this is somehow used by that Android project,
Yep.
right?
This is very
So
similar to how Indie SDK is. I'm very familiar with .so files.
yeah, I had to do some research on it because I'm like, what is this?
yeah.
So it looks like it seemed to work. I would need to actually, I don't know, probably prove, some whether some of these functions still work or if the mobile demo still works. I guess my goal will be to make sure I can run that successfully.
Mm.
And then maybe play around with some of these functions and see what I can test. But I'm
What
still kind of wrapping my head around the code. Sorry, go ahead.
One of the things I was going to say is that I don't know if the mobile agent is using ASCII or if it's using any SDK. I'm guessing any SDK, but that
Yeah.
was the biggest thing that I noticed is that because the configuration for the wallet is different between Indie SDK and ASCII, um,
Okay.
and it's not significantly different from my perspective. It's the biggest difference is the how you set up your encryption key. It's a little bit more involved with ASCII, which is honestly good because it gives us flexibility. Um, but to address the can we just generate two of them? I would think so. And or we can just get rid of the indie one. That might blow up the demo app, but we don't want to use India and the Indie SDK in the first place. So
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm trying to see if I'll run it and kind of play around with it, see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Like long term, the VCX Indy probably shouldn't be there in that UDL, and our UDL should be, recommending the latest, which is ASCAR. Um, just wondering, does this, when you ran this command, did it output, a Kotlin file or whatever language you're running it for?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good question. I did not see that, so I can actually run it right now again. I'm wondering if I maybe messed something up or removed something, but no, I didn't see. While I was testing it, I did see a .kt file,
Yes. Yeah.
a vcx.kt file. I think this is the one, right?
Yeah.
Um, but then I made this fix and then it didn't do it again. So
Mm.
need to check. So let's see if I can finish this right now, running this. But yeah, it should, because that's kind of what it's trying to do, right? It's trying to copy that generated one and put it into that Android project.
Yes.
Uh
Yeah. Where does that do you have that generated directory? The core source or hyperledger?
that might be the problem then. I think maybe not. So that's kind of that's why I modified this a bit. For example, here in line 16, I had to remove
Mm.
a Rust folder here to get this to
Yes.
work. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, maybe I need to double check whether this has this directly. Maybe that's why it's not generating it. Let me
Yeah.
double.
Well, I think, do you want to have a look now? Like, see on your sidebar, you
Sure,
have the core
sure.
directory.
So what would that?
I think under wrappers/unify, uh,
Okay, core. Okay, gotcha. Core source.
and then org.
Oh, oh, I see. Here it is.
Okay. So it
I
is
don't know why
generated.
my okay, yeah, yeah. Oh, it just did it. Okay. Yeah, I think must have did something wrong at the beginning where I might have
Oh,
stopped there. I just generated right. Oh, where'd it go?
Oh, well,
maybe.
specifically, it removes it on line 27. So it creates it, and then it copies it to the Android demo directory, and then it removes it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So
Just something. So you've written the Unify bind generate uh again for the different UDL. I think that might just override the KT file that you generated the first time on line 20. Because that generate line, it doesn't do the compiling of the SO file of the Rust binary. It's responsible for generating the like Kotlin bindings, right?
I was wondering
Um,
about that.
yeah, so that those lines that you now have twice should be the ones that's responsible for generating the vcx.kt file. Um, and so I think if you ran it twice, as you are now, I think it might just override. Yeah.
I don't know if I quite got that. Can you repeat that? So
So yeah, the unify bind generate command that you're running on line 20 and 22,
yeah,
all it should do, I think, is generate the Kotlin file, the vcx.kt file, right?
okay, yep,
It doesn't do the generation of the SO file or the compiling of the SO binary. That happens later on in this script, I think, or at a
okay.
different point. And so therefore, since you're running the generate function twice, I think
Hmm,
it might just end up being that line 22 overrides the
got it,
vcx.kt file generated in line 20.
got it. I see what you mean. Yeah, that would make sense then. That's why I saw it before, and then when I added this extra line, I didn't see it anymore. Okay.
Hmm.
All right, so if we're gonna probably not end up using this, I could probably get rid of this and just leave it like this.
Yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, like uh, a nice solution would be if, I think if we went back to one UDL file, vcx.udl, and
Mhm.
that one VCX UDL file is using the ASCAR set of dependencies. Um, and we stop using Indy within the Unify project. That would be a nice whole solution, I think. Um, yeah.
So wait, so go back to the vcx.udl file, but but adding the indie stuff
Uh,
as well, or
Getting rid of the VCX Indy.udl.
okay,
Yeah.
got it. I
Yeah,
see
because
what
like
you mean.
we don't want the indie stuff really. So it'd be nice if the Unify Aries VCX crate that we have here just gets rid of the indie stuff, I think. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I think I could do that.
Yeah, just let me know if you run into troubles and yeah, we'll
Sure,
sort through it.
sure thing. Yep, cool. Thanks, James.
Maybe a question for you guys. I know you had interest in the sort of, I forgot the word we use, like a DIDCOM RS framework. This nice framework that could sit on top of Aries-vcx, since it doesn't really properly exist at the moment. Aries-vcx is just sort of
Yep.
a very raw Aries interface. Um, do you think if you guys are still planning to, build that or consider that, would you instead build the Unify layer on top of that framework instead of what it currently is, where this Unify layer is sitting on top of more raw Aries interactions?
We would want to do that, yes. The thought is to still go ahead and create a Aries VCX framework, and then we would want to put the Unify on top of that framework, um, rather than the lower level functions that are presently happening with Unify.
Yep. Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. The last thing I had on the agenda here was to talk about the problem report. I don't know if this will be a lengthy discussion or not. I don't remember which PR we were discussing this in. George, but we were talking about wanting to be able to do problem report handling. Do you think that it's essentially wanting to be able to send problem reports using we want the state machine to be able to send a problem report uh, based off of errors that it ends up encountering. Um,
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
don't know. Do, yeah,
my thoughts are I'm not too sure. So this relates to what I was just saying about Aries VCX being this sort of raw engine at the moment. Um, we have all the infrastructure there to generate problem reports
yeah,
in whatever state machine you're stepping through. So you can do a dot fail or a dot receive problem report to generate or receive those messages. Um, However, what we aren't, and that sort of is how our state machines are currently structured. We just generate the messages for you, and then it's your job to send them out. Um, and so, the AATH is sort of responsible for orchestrating that sending out of the messages, or rather, the Aries VCX agent abstraction we have is responsible for sending the messages, right? Um, and so, something I'm not really sure about is whether our state machines should do more than that, and whether our state machines should try to, I don't know, recommend that the consumer sends a problem report. Because at the moment, what happens is if a state transition fails, so if you try to I don't know, accept a did exchange request and you get an error back, all that happens is the state machine just gives an error back. It doesn't, recommend that you send a problem report or anything like that. It's sort of the consumer of that state machine's issue to decide whether this error uh, qualifies for sending a problem report or not. So I think, yeah, we didn't want to make that decision for the Aries-vcx raw consumer.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm not sure if we should change that narrative a bit.
I
Does that make
think
sense?
that it definitely makes sense. I think my take on this is that there is some things that, and I'm open to. I'm not set in stone on this, but my current take on it is that there are some errors in which we should just error, let the consumer decide what the next best approach is, whether that is fail, send a problem report, and wait for further user input,
Mm,
or to retry with different parameters or same parameters. Like let the consumer, the framework, or the consumer decide what's the next step. Uh,
mm,
or I think that there may be appropriate scenarios where, and maybe this should be configuration controlled, and that if we configure it to say, hey, we want you to do some default problem reports, where like in this case, I think this is a perfect example where uh, this error occurring here relating to not having a did doc or a did rotate being attached.
yeah.
And it's very
Yeah.
specific in the code here where we've already done the filtering to determine that that's the error that is happening. It gets a little gross, I think, to extract the essentially duplicate the checks of like, okay, what kind of error did we get? Okay, should we send a
Mm,
problem report in at like the framework layer? Say, okay, should we send a problem report? It's kind of duplicating the logic of uh okay, is it for this check? So we check here, and we also have to determine in a different place whether or not, based off of the error that occurred somewhere else, if we're going to send a problem report. When in this case, I feel like it's very appropriate to send a problem report because they sent us a bad message. I don't. I could see there being an argument for we should just always send a problem report. Uh, with the caveat of maybe we should have that be able to be configured so that the user can say, hey, I don't want you to send any default problem reports. I want to handle everything on my own. So there's some argument there in that it helps with some errors that we know that there's a clear mm, there's a clear next step of like if we receive there's nothing we can do if we receive a bad did exchange response other than telling them, hey, you sent us a bad did exchange response. um, that does have that does, I guess, muddy some of the mental model around it though, so I guess that's some of my thoughts on it.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see why you highlighted this part of the code now. That makes a lot of sense because, yeah, this is a case where you definitely want to send a problem report, right? Because
Hmm.
you can't retry it. It's a
Yep.
bad message that you've received, essentially.
Yep.
Um, it's not like a retriable network error or wallet wasn't open. It's
Exactly.
this is a bad message.
Yep. Yep. Well, and it's
Yeah.
also not even one where, like, for instance, where you don't want to send a problem report is if you can't respond to a proof request because you don't have the credentials to fulfill that proof request. That is a
Mm,
case where if you send a problem report saying that, you're revealing a PAI by saying I don't have a driver's license, for instance, in a request
yeah,
for a
yeah,
driver's license. That's a very prime case where you generally likely don't want to send, at least automatically send a problem report.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Good point. Um, yeah, okay. So yeah, I do agree that it should be it could be the raw VCX responsibility to suggest or generate a problem report when it's very obvious that it's the only thing that can happen from here is that you send back a problem report. Um, and then I suppose everything else that's sort of a gray area or is a no-go can continue
Hmm.
being an error.
Yep.
And maybe something like the Aries framework on top can make its own mind up about whether the errors or not, or it's config driven, as you mentioned.
Right. Cool. That makes sense to me. Um,
Yeah, because like so this is in the did exchange state machine handlers. They're sort of set up at the moment to return these transition errors, transition re results. Um, and in the transition error variant of the result, I think it returns both the error and the original state machine.
mhm.
And that's done for Rust borrow checking reasons, so that you don't have to clone the state machine,
Ah,
you
yep.
call it. So now when you receive an error back, you still have ownership of that state machine. That's why that's done.
Hmm.
But it could also, you know, I don't know, the error variant maybe could return a problem report that it is suggesting that you send or something like that.
Mm.
Yeah. I think, yeah, we'd need to consider how to design it best.
Do you? Maybe I'm. Uh, Alternate approach potentially would be,
Hmm.
do you think it would be valid to specify have a more specific error type here that we could then filter for on the framework side? Because I think that could potentially simplify the framework logic of like, oh yeah, we just have a switch case where any errors that are failed, we can have it automatically send a problem report if it was uh, these uh, error types matched against what got returned, um, versus trying to have to do that based off of like the text in the error, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that'd make sense as well. Yeah.
Okay, I think that might be cleaner because then the role of um, the state machine is just to operate on the state machine, returning,
Mhm.
as I understand it, returning errors, returning the state machine, and or the appropriate message to send,
Mhm.
um, versus trying to add another piece there of like, if it's an error, it might contain a problem report. Uh,
Yeah.
we're just gonna the state machine, its responsibility is just the error, not the associated problem report. I think that might be a cleaner, after talking through it with you, that might be cleaner that way.
Yep. Yep. And then, yeah, the framework is responsible for sending out that problem report, creating it as well.
Yeah,
Cool.
cool. Sweet. And that actually puts us at just before the end of the hour. Any other last minute things for the end of the call?
I'm not sure if it could be part of the call, but kind of want to share some non-related BCX stuff. But maybe it could be after the call. If you guys don't mind, maybe just 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Do
it's
you
cool.
want it going?
This is related to some stuff for, with, let me send you guys the link through here, the chat. Sort of the EU stuff going on.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you guys have been following. I know, James, you've been following somewhat. I'm not sure if you guys familiar with Kim Hamilton from DIF. I don't know if you guys heard of her, but she's like the executive director there, and she just put in a proposal there on the ARF to actually use the IDs. So I think she just published that along with a few other people, high level organizations. So I thought it's interesting to see um that sort of initiative and regulation going on over there in Europe. Started as sort of like this very basic technical document, but in recent weeks, I've been seeing that one, they're proposing things like anon-creds, right?
Mm,
Which even in the same document, there was a reference to bifold and some of the projects that James has worked on before in his past companies. And now I'm seeing Kim, who heads DIF, who basically sort of own a lot of the standards in W3C, like the ID. I guess just to put it that way, right? But now they're kind of pushing DID for the ARF. So I thought it's pretty cool to see that, you know, uh they're taking this kind of very seriously now. So just wanted to share that.
yeah, yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I read through the non-creds proposal for the EUDI stuff, whenever that was, a week ago or so. And that took me like 2 hours to read through it all because it's so long. But it's very, very good to see it come up. Yeah, to be honest, I thought DIDs already were involved in the ARF, but I guess I'm mistaken. If Kim's posting this.
There's a lot
Uh,
of gaps in that document. It doesn't, there's like there's a lot of holes in it. Like it's doesn't reference, direct stuff, and it's a bit ambiguous. I haven't read it myself completely. I sort of just use a nice little chat GPT feature to give me a
yeah.
summary of it because it's so long, like you said.
Mm,
Um, and I don't see, like, from what I could tell, like references to like even ledgers, right, or blockchain. I didn't really find anything in that even, and I thought that would be part of it somehow, but apparently it's not. I can't remember if the IDs was part of it, but if I try to recall, I don't think so. Or else DIF wouldn't be proposing it. But I'm just really happy to see this kind of moving forward, even if it's, at least for us, all the way over there. It's really interesting to see that picking up.
mm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, something I liked about the non-creds discussion that happened is I noticed the authors of that cryptographer's review and recommendation for a non-creds. Two of the authors were the C and the L of CL signatures, which is what
Oh
backs most
yeah.
month, which is just cool to see that.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I'll need to look into that. I'm surprised about DIDs not being included because my understanding of the proposed stack was something like SDJWTs over
Yep.
OpenID for VC um, exchanges protocols. And I guess maybe those protocols and those credential formats, it's not a requirement to have DIDs in there, perhaps.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
why.
good question. I'm not really too familiar with OIDC, but I guess not. I have to double check on that document.
Hmm. Mm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
need I
So
need to read. I would my thought process is like I need to read through the actual architectural recommendations or be more
Mm.
involved in those discussions to better understand the stack. Uh, and whether or not DIDs are a part of it, I don't know. I know that a non-creds wasn't, and that it's a open ID for VC approach. So
Mm.
um,
right.
interesting. So thank you for sharing, Alberto.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Awesome. Well, with that, I think that's a good call for today, and we'll definitely chat at least in another 2 weeks, if not sooner. Uh, thank you, George. Thank you, Alberto. We'll talk to you later.
All right.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you
guys.
guys.
Nice to meet you, Alberto. Hope to
Same,
see more.
George. Take care.
Cool.
Yep.